Welcome, gentle listeners. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and fun of the Warhammer 40k universe. Today, we'll be looking at the history of an oddity in the grim darkness of the future. A rarity indeed, one might say, as we are here to discuss an army that has been discontinued. So everything that is said and recorded in this entry is firmly non-canonical. It is just a bit of fun for a Friday, and I hope it scratches a lore itch. Alas, I could not bring myself to write a tale of the wonderful SQUATS. But for further details on why they were discontinued, etc., and their history, please do see my entry called The Foulness. But don't put it on loud. I was inexperienced and overdid the theatrical screaming. Sorry. Now, let us lean on the ancient wisdom that outlines the entirety of what it was to be a SQUAT, a member of Homo sapiens rotundus. Taken from the Compendium. To quote, The SQUATS, by Brian Ansell, Nigel Stillman, and Graham Davis. Of all the abhuman strains, SQUATs are perhaps the closest to normal humans in physiological terms. They are allowed great freedom by the Imperium, supplying warriors and machine crews for the Imperial Guard in exchange for the comparative autonomy of their homeworlds. The homeworlds. The origins of the SQUATs, like those of other abhuman strains, lie in the Age of Strife, when warp storms cut off many areas of the Imperium. Even Terra itself was isolated for a time, and the group of star systems known as the Homeworlds were cut off from the rest of the Imperium for several millennia. The Homeworlds are in one of the oldest areas of human expansion. The planets have a surprising number of common features, notably high gravity and a bleak, inhospitable environment, which some scholars have claimed are responsible for the development of the set of mutations which define the SQUAT abhuman strain. The surfaces of the homeworlds are invariably rocky and barren, with few, if any, native life forms. Atmosphere is either thin or non-existent, and where an atmosphere is present, the surface is lashed by violent storms. Despite, or perhaps because of, their bleak, forbidding nature, the homeworlds are rich in mineral deposits. These were the main factors behind the early colonization of the planets. The richness of deep lodes, coupled with frequent magnetic and radioactive storms, led the miners to develop an underground culture. These underground settlements were dependent on vast arrays of machinery to keep them alive and to work their mines. And while physical strength and resilience were still important, a compact, stocky build was more practical than a normal human frame in the low tunnels and cramped machine rooms. Thus developed the two main features which distinguish SQUATs from normal humans: their mechanical aptitude and their short, powerful build. The history of the SQUATs. Despite the fact the homeworlds were cut off for millennia, an almost complete history of the SQUATs survives, thanks to the painstakingly maintained records and chronicles of each SQUAT stronghold. Scholars of the Administratum are still engaged in analysing the millions of individual records and assessing their significance to the Imperium. But the broad history of the SQUATs, divided into 5 ages, is common knowledge. The earliest of the SQUAT ages is the Age of Founding, which corresponds roughly to the Dark Age of technology. During this period, the SQUATs had not emerged as a distinct race, and indeed some scholars argue that the Age of Founding should not be counted as part of SQUAT history. This is the age some 20 millennia before the present day, when the first mining colonies were established on the homeworlds. Contact with Terra was almost constant, and the homeworlds were well supplied for their task of winning mineral wealth from the bleak planets. The first age of SQUAT history proper is the Age of Isolation, which corresponds to the early phases of the Imperial Age of Strife, some 18 millennia before the present. The mining colonies which later became the SQUAT homeworlds were isolated from the rest of the Imperium by terrible warp storms. So close, indeed, did these storms come to the mining colonies that some planets and small systems were sucked into the seething chaos and never seen again. The severing of contact with Terra led to continual shortages of fuel and foodstuffs, and the miners were forced to become self-sufficient, developing considerable technical expertise in the process. The mining colonies became independent strongholds, trading amongst themselves and sharing resources and discoveries. It was during the Age of Isolation that the Engineers Guild first developed as a social and political power within squat society, and strongholds began to group together in leagues formed by complex political and trading agreements. A slight abating in the warp storms led to the encounters with aliens in the Age of Trade. While the rest of the Imperium was still locked in the wars of the Age of Strife, the squats made contact with both Orcs and Eldar. At the beginning of the Age of Trade, some strongholds were attacked, but the aliens quickly realized that the squats were determined and tenacious fighters, and that trade was a more practical arrangement. The squats took full advantage of their tremendous mineral wealth, which they traded for weapons, foodstuffs, and high-technology systems. To this day, squat hydroponic plants developed with Eldar help are amongst the most efficient food sources in the Imperium. The squats remained carefully neutral in the numerous conflicts between Eldar and Orcs, maintaining trade links with both sides. There were inevitably small wars from time to time, but for the most part the squats' complex structures of treaties and trade agreements maintained a stable peace. The Age of Trade lasted for nearly 3 millennia, but finally collapsed when an enormous Orc battle fleet under the command of Grunhag the Flayer attempted a full-scale invasion of the homeworld. Losses on both sides were astronomical, with vicious tunnel fights through the mine workings and bloody pitched battles in the squats' underground settlements. The squats appealed to their Eldar trade partners for help against the invading Orcs, but none was received. The Age of Wars, as it became known, is regarded by the squats as the blackest chapter in their history, and the double betrayal by Orcs and Eldar gave rise to the culture of enmity, which still persists. Many strongholds were wiped out by the Orcs, and the traditional epic ballad known as the Fall of Imbach commemorates one such destruction. Even today, expeditions are mounted from the squat homeworld in search of lost strongholds, and these expeditions are often accompanied by Adeptus Mechanicus personnel eager to rediscover lost squat technology. The final phase of squat history is the Age of Rediscovery, which continues during the present day. As the Imperium recovered from the Age of Strife and began to reunite the scattered worlds of humanity, the squat homeworlds were rediscovered, and contact with the Imperium was re-established. The Imperium found that a distinct culture had developed on the homeworlds, and that the squats had moved outwards through the galaxy, extending their domains. Often they settled harsh planets similar to their own homeworld. They also occupied more conventional worlds able to support normal human life. Squats and the Imperium. The squat homeworlds were almost unique in the Imperium, as they were not directly controlled by the Administratum. Instead, they are allowed a certain amount of autonomy, being ruled by their strongholds and leagues, just as they were before the Age of Rediscovery. The experiences of the previous millennia has left the squats with a strong sense of cultural unity and a fiercely independent nature, and instead of rejoining the Imperium as subject worlds, the homeworlds negotiated a series of treaties which enabled them to keep their independence. The racial character of the squats, hard-working, tenacious, honourable, and inimical to alien races, is almost perfect for the Imperium's point of view, and the Imperium is content to allow them a great degree of self-government. In exchange for their comparative freedom, the homeworlds provide troops for the Imperial forces and trade their mineral wealth exclusively with the Imperium, trade that has made the squats a wealthy race. They also undertook at the start of the Age of Rediscovery to allow the Adeptus Mechanicus unrestricted access to their technology. It is significant that the squat homeworlds have a higher incidence of working standard template construct equipment from the Dark Age of technology than any other group of worlds known to humanity. The squats rule themselves in all internal matters, but are expected to follow Imperial policy on wider matters. There has never been any conflict on this point, largely because squats as a race are not greatly interested in what goes on beyond their strongholds and homeworlds. Their long period of isolation has made them an inward-looking race. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of the relationship between squats and the Imperium is that squats do not follow the Imperial cult. Instead, they practice a form of ancestor worship, venerating the dead of their clan and their family. Every squat joins his ancestors on his death, adding his honour to that of his forebears, and a part of his name and his honour remains with his living descendants, forming a constant link between the living and the dead. Squats are very careful to ensure that their deeds and life will add to the glory of the clan and its ancestors. They guard their reputation fiercely and will go to great lengths to blot out a disgrace to their honour or the honour of their clan. When squats serve alongside the Imperial Guard, they adopt certain aspects of the Imperial cult, incorporating them into their own ancestor worship. The Imperial line, as preached by the Imperial Guard commissars who come into contact with squat forces, is that the ancestor spirits of the squats are watched over by the Emperor, and the squats are happy to accept this idea and participate in the rituals of Emperor worship on those terms. Squats and Chaos. To the shame of the squat race, there are many strongholds and brotherhoods who have sided with Chaos. During the wars of the Horus Heresy, squat forces fought on both sides, and inevitably some fell prey to the corruption of Chaos. Like the other followers of Horus, these have now largely been banished to the Eye of Terror, but there are always rumours of isolated groups of Chaos Squat raiders in various parts of the Imperium. It has even been rumoured that some of the strongholds which were lost to the warp storms in the Age of Isolation may have survived, their horribly mutated inhabitants raiding into the Imperium from time to time. Squat Physiology. The squats are the most human-like of the abhuman races, standing about 2/3 of the height of a normal human, with a stocky, powerful build. Their hair is very strong and fast-growing, and most squats cultivate short, pointed beards, or at least moustaches and sideburns. Despite their short, thick-fingered hands, squats have a very high degree of manual dexterity, and are able to operate the most intricate machinery with ease. Squats are extraordinarily long-lived by normal human standards. A squat of 300 years is normal, and some squats, known as living ancestors, are often so ancient that their true age can only be guessed at. In character, squats are an honourable race, but they are also irascible and often short-tempered. In battle, they are renowned for their doughty resolve and tenacity as warriors. Coupled with their amazing ability as miners and workers of metal, this has made them a valuable asset for the Imperium. Squat Society. Squat Society is based on the Stronghold. A stronghold may be a surviving mining community from the original colonization, or a so-called New Hold, founded when the race expanded during the latter part of the Age of Isolation and the early part of the Age of Trade. Strongholds are self-sufficient autonomous communities, ruled by a hereditary squat lord and an aristocratic class known as the Hearthguard. They are comparable to the city-states of early Terran cultures, and a great number of strongholds may coexist close together. Strongholds join together in leagues for mutual defence, trade and other dealings with the Imperium. A league may vary in size considerably. The League of Emberg, for instance, consists of 4 strongholds, while the powerful Capellan League is made up of over 3,000. Each league is ruled by a High Council, comprising the lords of each member stronghold. The High Council debates all matters which affect the League as a whole, and ratifies trade and other agreements on behalf of its members' strongholds. It also serves as a court of appeal for cases which involve the death sentence. There is no formal organisation between the leagues on any home world, although they maintain constant communication and act together in times of war. Strongholds. Traditionally, each stronghold centres around a mine and the underground settlements associated with it. Although as the race expanded in the ages of isolation and trade, different types of world were colonised by the squats, and some strongholds are not associated with mining activity. Each stronghold is ruled by a hereditary lord, who is supported by a powerful body of retainers known as the Hearthguard. It is the Hearthguard which provides the elite core of a squat military force, as well as providing servants and advisors to the Lord himself. When the Lord takes to the battlefield in person, the Hearthguard fights as a unit under his command. In most strongholds, the Hearthguard has become an aristocracy composed of a limited number of families or clans. The principal military force of a squat stronghold is its brotherhood, or war brethren. Each squat has an obligation of military service to his stronghold, and can be called to serve for a period of 30 to 70 years in the Brotherhood. However, because squats live long and breed slowly, a tradition requires that a squat may not be called to the Brotherhood until he has sired and raised 2 sons to maturity, which in squat terms is the age of 70 Terran years. Thus the continuity of the race is not threatened by its military activities. When his period of service has expired, a squat returns to his stronghold with honour, and hopefully not a little wealth. He then takes up a position of responsibility in his family's business, having reached full adulthood by virtue of his military experience. Although the Brotherhoods are the main defence forces of the Strongholds, they are far better known for their mercenary activities. In times of peace, a Stronghold's military forces are traded in the same way as its other resources, either to fight for the Imperium or other Strongholds. As war is an honourable profession for a squat, these mercenary adventures are rarely resented. Indeed, they are regarded as an integral part of every squat's life. On occasion, unscrupulous or incompetent squat lords have sent brotherhoods into impossible situations, especially in the interleague squabbles which were widespread during the age of isolation and trade. This problem has been largely resolved by the practice of placing one of the lord's close relatives, known as a warlord, in command of the brotherhood, ensuring that no undue risk is taken and that the honour of the stronghold is not compromised. Some particularly adventurous lords may send out their stronghold's brotherhood on expeditions, regarding these as little more than an extension of their other business activities. The term expedition is rather loosely defined, and these ventures can range from a search for a stronghold that was wiped out in the Age of War, to an expansionist action against alien races, to a full-blown campaign of piracy. Some brotherhoods have turned to buccaneering as a profession, amassing wealth for an honourable return home, the booty being distributed between the pirates themselves and the lord of the stronghold. Squat reavers, as they are known, are strange by normal human standards. Their single-minded attention is directed purely on financial gain, and they will attack anything, any worthwhile target with grim and implacable resolve, but completely without prejudice or malice. In the Age of Rediscovery, the squat homeworlds have undertaken to provide the Imperium with a tithe, which takes the form of brotherhoods being sent to serve with the Imperium, or indeed, as complete squat forces under the Imperial banner. Space Marines are noted for their intolerance to abhuman races, whom they see as tainted and genetically impure, and the Administratum will not generally post squat troops to areas where they will be in close contact with Marines. The Engineers Guild. Like so much of squat culture, the Engineers Guild traces its origins back to the Age of Isolation. Squats as a whole developed a considerable technical expertise in order to survive without support from Terra, and there was a regular traffic between strongholds in mechanical supplies and techniques. From this traffic arose a distinct class of travelling engineer, moving constantly between strongholds, spreading knowledge and solving technical problems. The guild arose to protect these individuals, who often found themselves caught up in interleague wars, a long way from their native stronghold. The guild soon developed into a real power through squat society, and engineers enjoyed a considerable prestige. The most gifted offspring of each stronghold are inducted into the guild at an early age, and intensively trained in all aspects of technology, engineering and machine maintenance. Although a squat is not deemed to have reached maturity until the age of 70, gifted youngsters may join the guild at 40 or even 30 years of age, though in doing so they must renounce all family ties and rights to inheritance. The guild is by no means as rigidly structured as the mainstream of squat society. Ability counts for everything, and age, birth and background are of no account. The engineers see themselves as unencumbered by petty traditions, while most stronghold squats would describe them as disorganized and anarchic. The Engineers Guild is subdivided into a number of lodges, each with its own leadership, symbols, customs and rituals. Clothing, equipment and vehicles tend to be marked with the symbol of the lodge rather than that of the guild, although all squat engineers wear the guild symbol of a hammer as a pendant. The technical jargon of the Engineers Guild varies slightly from lodge to lodge. An engineer from one lodge can make himself understood by a member of another lodge if he wishes, or can make use of his lodge dialect so that an outsider cannot understand him when he discusses technical matters. Each squat stronghold has an enclave of guildsmen, even though individual engineers come and go as they please, or as the guild orders. The engineers renounce all stronghold allegiances on joining the guild, and do not mix a great deal with the other squats of a stronghold. Sometimes an engineer may leave the guild and join a stronghold through marriage, Even so, his sons will almost certainly join the guild in their turn. And while guild members may attach themselves to a particular stronghold for years or even generations, they can move on at will, and owe their true allegiance to the guild alone. SQUAT engineers have a very characteristic appearance, which to human eyes seems to contradict the high esteem in which they are held by the rest of their race. They wear no helmets, and their hair is grown long, being either tied or greased back. They favour well-worn leather and other hard-wearing working clothes with tough monkey boots, usually scuffed by the constant knocks and battering they take. Many engineers add bandanas and mirror shades or goggles to their outfits, often jauntily pushing their goggles up onto their foreheads. They travel light, not generally bothering with anything that they cannot carry on the bikes and trikes, which are as much a status symbol as a means of transport. Because of their wandering lifestyle, engineers are more adventurous than the bulk of squads, are often found serving with brotherhoods on the battlefield, or even hiring themselves and their machines out on a mercenary basis, working throughout Imperial space and beyond. Individual SQUAT engineers with impressive reputations may be directly recruited by the Imperium, and some have been known to reach senior positions within the Adeptus Mechanicus. Living Ancestors. The typical lifespan for a SQUAT is about 300 years. A small proportion of the population, however, reaches the age of 400. And once a SQUAT has lived this long, his chances of longevity is drastically increased. Lifespans of 800 years are common amongst this group, and there are some individuals whose true age can only be guessed at. This small proportion of the SQUAT population, which lives to the great age, is treated with enormous respect, being known as living ancestors, or spirit lords. They are treated as living members of the Ancestor group, which forms the basis of SQUAT religion. Their long lives have filled them with wisdom, and they are their lord's most respected and trusted advisors. Also, at about the age of 500, certain physiological changes begin to occur. As age begins to sap their speed and strength, they develop an incredible degree of mental and physical resilience, along with certain psychic powers. The fact that psychic powers are practically unknown amongst other SQUATs makes the living ancestors doubly venerated. These psychic powers come from their spiritual closeness to the dead ancestors of their clan, which they tap as a source of psychic energy. Their strength as psychers is directly related to the prestige and honour of their Strongholds ancestors, and the higher the status of the ancestors, the more powerful are the living ancestors. When a SQUAT reaches living ancestor status, he surrenders his name and his goods to his descendants, just as if he had actually passed on. A funeral ritual is held by his clan, and the new living ancestor goes to live with the others of his kind. As well as advising the lord of their stronghold, the living ancestors often accompany the brotherhood in battle, providing defensive psychic support and advising the warlord. On the battlefield. SQUAT forces may be found on the battlefield in a number of circumstances. They may be serving with Imperial Guard forces, or the forces of a rogue trader, or take part in an Imperial conflict as part of their homeworld's tithe of service to the Imperium. As well as using single brotherhoods to fight alongside other human and abhuman troops, the Imperium uses complete SQUAT armies to impose its will. SQUATs may fight on their own account, defending their stronghold or taking part in an inter-league dispute or other local conflict. Given the volatile temperament of most SQUATs, it is not unusual for brotherhoods of adjacent strongholds to go to war, fighting for territory, mineral wealth, or over some slight to the honour of the stronghold. They may have been hired out by their lord as a mercenary force to serve in some foreign conflict, although they will not generally serve alongside Orkoids or Eldar, unless they have turned to chaos. SQUAT mercenaries can also be found serving with Imperial forces or with other SQUATs. It is traditional for their lords to hire their forces back and forth to serve in each other's conflicts. They may have been sent out as reavers by their lord, or may have taken to buccaneering of their own accord. Regardless of the circumstances, the Brotherhood organization remains the same. There are 4 main troop types in any SQUAT force: the Hearthguard, the Brotherhood, the Engineer Guild, and the Living Ancestors. To guard against the misuse of Brotherhood troops by unscrupulous stronghold lords, a Brotherhood force is always led by a close relative of the Lord, known as the Warlord. Under his personal command is a unit of the Hearthguard, drawn from the Lord's loyal retainers, who form an aristocratic class in the Stronghold. The Hearthguard is a warrior elite, and their status is reflected by their fondness for lavishly ornamented gold jewellery. Belts, buckles, chains, pieces of armour and even weaponry are decorated with traditional designs in gold and other precious metals, and Hearthguard's prowess is displayed in the form of these decorative items. It is a tradition for a lord to present the Hearthguard with a gift in recognition of valour and loyalty, which is nearly always specially made, sometimes by the hand of the lord himself, the highest of honours, and is often decorated with scenes of the event which it commemorates. These trophies are handed down from father to son, and a leading member of a long-established Hearthguard family can be expected to take the field resplendent with priceless antique jewellery. Unlike the normal Squat principles of succession, where everything passes to the heirs on a Squat's death, a Hearthguard cannot inherit his dead father's jewellery and trophies until he has won his first trophy on his own account. He then inherits his father's name, along with his full panoply of jewellery and equipment. The adoptive name of a Hearthguard commemorates the greatest deed of his father, and will remind him and his companions of his ancestors' fame. Because of their richly decorated equipment and other trophies, the Hearthguard are very individual in their appearance, and do not wear any kind of uniform. Each Squat's equipment and jewellery tells of his own deeds and those of his forebears, and the Hearthguards vie with each other in the distinctiveness and splendour of their appearance. Archaic and medieval styles are very popular, with lavish decoration in traditional patterns. It has often been remarked that a warlord and his Hearthguard on their motorbikes bear more than a passing resemblance to the armoured knights on horseback who may be found in many medieval cultures. Rather like the knights of medieval worlds, warlords and Hearthguards often have magnificent suits of exo-armour, all enclosed, sealed and self-powered environment suits built for them by the Engineering Guild. Like other Hearthguard equipment, exo-armour is handed down from father to son, and is perhaps the proudest status symbol of the Squat military aristocracy. One detail which is common to the whole of the Hearthguard is the stylized image of a Squat face, which appears on armour, helmet, pendants and other pieces of jewellery. This is an image associated with Squat ancestor worship, representing the spirits of the ancestors watching over their descendants. The bulk of a Brotherhood's troops are those who are referred to as simply Brotherhood. These troops lack the individuality of the Hearthguard, wearing the colours and insignia of a Brotherhood as a uniform. Squats prefer muted colours reminiscent of the rocks and sand of their homeworlds. Browns, greys and greens are popular in varying shades and mixtures, as are black, white and deep red. It is common for seams and piping to be picked out in a contrasting colour. Those Brotherhoods who are sent out reaving tend to be more individual in their dress. In most cases they wear their own clothing rather than a uniform, so that their home stronghold cannot be identified. However, Squats who have made a career out of piracy are as flamboyant in their own way as the most ostentatious Hearthguard. Often they will adopt distinctive uniforms and colours, so that they are immediately recognisable. In this way, their fearsome reputation does half their work for them. Brotherhood troops are generally armed with lasguns, but the Squats have a characteristic fondness for heavy firepower, and heavy bolters are a favourite weapon. Most squads will have at least one heavy weapon, and sometimes an entire squad may be equipped with heavy weapons. Since no Squat would consider himself fully dressed without at least one sidearm, it is not unusual for Squats to go armed to the teeth as a matter of course. Most citizens of the Imperium carry a sidearm and a blade weapon as part of their standard dress, but Squats are renowned as particularly fond of weaponry. This fondness is reinforced by the hostile environments in which they are raised, where dangerous flora and fauna and the constant threat of Orc and Eldar raids encourages even the youngest of Squats to pack a few handguns and something loud and heavy on his bike. The Engineers Guild. Just as the Engineers Guild has a constant, if shifting, presence in each Squat stronghold, So most brotherhoods are accompanied by some engineer guild troops. Engineers wear a personalized uniform of leathers over t-shirt or singlets, with individual decorations such as fringes and studs. Lodge symbols and the universal hammer symbol of the Engineers Guild are worn instead of Stronghold and Brotherhood badges. Guildmasters are more elaborately dressed, usually wearing heavy and ornate chains of office. Apart from the dress, the other most distinctive feature of SQUAT engineers is their motorbikes and trikes. These are universally favoured by engineers as personal transport, and some have been adopted for battlefield use by the addition of weapon mounts. The engineers make more extensive use of bikes on the battlefield than almost any other troop type. Living Ancestors. Living Ancestors take the field in small numbers with SQUAT forces, drawn from either the Stronghold or from the Engineers Guild, to provide sage advice for the leaders and psychic support for the warriors. Their psychic abilities concentrate on defense, but they are not entirely incapable of attack. Living Ancestors are distinguished by their high-collared robes, with collars rising above their heads and their ornate neck chains. Living Ancestors from the same stronghold always have the same level of power. Their psychic energy is directly tapped from the stronghold's ancestor spirits, and their power varies from the prestige and status of these spirits. Standards. SQUAT brotherhoods vary very widely in the style of banners and standards that they employ. But a brotherhood will almost always carry its own banner into battle, and sometimes the banner of its home stronghold as well. It is a common practice to mount these standards on bikes. Stronghold banners are largely heraldic, bearing the symbol of the stronghold and sometimes a motto or slogan. Brotherhood banners tend to be more elaborate, with a central picture surrounded by ornate borders containing battle honours and slogans. The picture may be of the Brotherhood's most famous exploit, or a design such as a SQUAT braying an orc or elder with a hammer. Brotherhoods in Imperial service may be presented with Imperial banners like those of the Imperial Guard. They may use the Imperial banner instead of, or as well as, their Stronghold banner, but are unwilling to part with their Brotherhood banner. The Engineers Guild has its own standards, which feature the central motif of the guild hammer or a lodge symbol. Guild banners are decorated to a lesser degree and tend not to be as elaborate as those of the Brotherhoods. SQUAT equipment. Suspensors and targeters. SQUATs are extremely tough, strong-boned and resilient, and they are able to carry a considerable weight. Despite this, the difficulties of life on the high-gravity homeworlds has influenced the design of SQUAT equipment, and they always build in the normal full requirement of suspensors to offset movement penalties, simply by force of habit. SQUAT breastplates. SQUAT warlords and their hearthguards have from time immemorial worn finely wrought breastplates and helms decorated with ancestral faces. In ancient times, breastplates would have been crafted from simple beaten metal plate. These much cherished items of war panoply have continued in favour in the most technologically advanced form of carapace breastplates, still decorated with traditional ancestor images. SQUAT Exo Armour. Exo Armour combines features of both power armour and dreadnought armour. The extensive protection it affords the wearer is especially useful when fighting in confined spaces where movement is restricted and it is difficult to avoid concentrated enemy fire. Exo Armour is thus greatly favoured by the SQUATs, who often find themselves in combat in subterranean tunnels or chambers, and who are not noted for their agility. Exo Armour also serves as a hostile environment suit, and the barren surface of the homeworlds has certainly stimulated the development of this form of armour by the SQUATs. SQUAT armourers are adept at forging rather striking exo armour, usually embellished with the visage of a SQUAT ancestor spirit. These finely wrought suits of exo armour become the prestigious war panoply of great lords and their hearthguards. End quote. I hope you have enjoyed that light bite and wandered down memory lane. Every day I secretly hope that more wee warriors will return to the galaxy. With the recent single figure for Necromunda and the return of the Zote after an equally long time in the wilderness of being squatted, I still hold out hopes. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to SQUATS, and if so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you are a regular gentle listener and see the value in what we do, then please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.